such that one public utility could eliminate having to pay all of those over-earnings back to the ratepayers by simply taking advantage of a one-year full-time amortization of that capital equipment, thereby denying the ratepayers that credit that they would get on their monthly statement.
Senator, the floor.
Mr. President, I would say in a vacuum that the gentleman is reasonably accurate. A couple of points. First of all, I would say that that generator is following the existing law that the General Assembly has previously established. Secondly, Mr. President, and of an enormous concern to me as a ratepayer, is that I don't think that there is anybody in this body, and perhaps anybody in the 140 members of the General Assembly, that has a clue to what the aggregated impact is going to be on any electrical generator in Virginia as a result of these multiple pieces of legislation that we have passed, and particularly in the area of green energy, where ratepayers are going to end up paying more. But I just don't think that we have a collective perspective on that. And so in a vacuum, I would say perhaps the gentleman is right, but looking at it in the perspective as what's gone through the General Assembly this year, I would say I don't know.
Right. I thank the gentleman, Mr. President, and when appropriate, speak briefly to the amendment.
You can do that right now, Senator.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm the first to admit that I know far, far less than some of the more experienced legislators, veterans in this body, like the gentleman from James City County that was just speaking. But I did review Senator Wagner's 966, and I did review the history of this. And here's how I see things. You may remember last week we had a very vigorous and healthy debate with the senator from Russell County, Senator Chafin, on the early retirement of coal-fired equipment. What that involves is if we retire it early, and I understand that a company like Dominion is simply doing what we ask or suggest that they do, then there is going to be the real possibility of an amortization schedule that is reevaluated, recalculated. And let's be clear, Dominion Energy, which is a great corporate citizen, is doing what any company would want to do. If you could amortize a schedule and do it for 30 years, and you can do it down to 20 years or 10 years or 1 year, any business, any industry will do that all day long, as they should. They have an obligation to their shareholders. But here is the problem as I see it. There is the potential for the following to occur. We have, right now, the State Corporation Commission will determine whether or not there are any over-earnings. You remember back in 2015, there was a time where in January of 2015, where we voted to freeze that review for a number of years. And some of us, when we were in the House, voted against it. We actually didn't think that was right. In 2018, along comes Senator Wagner's bill and the GTSA SB 966, and it allows some of those over-earnings to be invested in technology or renewables. But here's what's happening now, as I see it, and I doesn't mean I'm absolutely correct, but the following could occur. The SCC could determine that there is an over-earnings of $200 million. That's not an exaggeration. In 2016, there were over-earnings of $400 million. If there are over-earnings of $200 million, that has to be repaid to the ratepayers. Everybody understands and agrees to that. But if the depreciation schedule could be constructed in a manner that you could do a one-time write-off, guess what happens to that $200 million? Phew, goes away. And it doesn't go back to the ratepayers. That's the potential that I see, and notwithstanding the fact that regulated monopolies are doing what we say to do, I think it's the bailiwick of the State Corporation Commission to determine this schedule, this depreciation schedule, and it's for that reason that I'd ask that you not undermine the guts of this legislation. I thank the body. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the Senator. Senior Senator from Fairfax, Senator Saslaw.
Does anyone else desire to speak on this?
Does anybody else wish to speak about the committee amendment? Seeing none, Senior Senator from Fairfax, Senator Sasslaw.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, the utilities are doing exactly what we told them to do. They set, 2 years ago, they set up a schedule. Now we come in with, a bill that says, no, we changed our mind. Now we want you to come in and we want to take another look at it. My understanding is the utilities, if the amendment by the senator from James City County goes through, that it makes the effective date, because these utility companies have already done planning. They make the effective date December 31st of next year. They're fine. They can live with it forever. But we can't keep coming in here every other year changing the ground rules because somebody has a bone to pick with them or thinks, well, we made a mistake. So I would hope that the amendment does get adopted. Like I said, I didn't support it in committee because I don't believe in what we're doing is the right thing, but I will support this amendment, and if that's adopted, the James City County amendment is adopted, then I'll support the bill. Otherwise, I cannot.
What purpose, Senator from King George, Senator Stewart, rise?
Mr. President, I apologize, but I did want to speak one more time, if I may.
Senator, has the floor.
And I didn't plan to stand up, but listening to those last comments, and the gentleman from Richmond, it boils down to this. The utility has an obligation to the shareholders. We have an obligation to the ratepayers. They are the folks who elect us. Regardless of whether anybody made a mistake or thinks they made a mistake in that grid transformation bill, our obligation and responsibility remains to the ratepayer. If you want to honor your responsibility and your obligation to the ratepayer, you will reject this amendment.
Thank you, Senator. Question is, shall the committee amendment be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. If noes have it, the committee amendment is rejected. Seeing at least 8 hands, we will have a recorded vote. Question is, shall the committee amendment be adopted? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 16, noes 23.
Ayes 16, noes 23. The committee amendment is rejected. Senator from James City County, Senator Norman.
Mr. President, I withdraw both of the floor amendments.
Thank you, Senator. Without objection, both floor amendments are withdrawn. Senator from King George, Senator Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd move that we waive reading of the floor amendment.
Thank you, Senator. The question is, shall the reading of the floor amendment be waived? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The reading of the floor amendment is waived. Senator from King George, Senator Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking to the amendment.
Senator's the floor.
Mr. President, it's a very simple amendment. I think we've had a thorough discussion of this bill, but it just simply removes the words coal-fired or natural gas-fired plants, because I think all plants should be treated equally. I just found out last week in King George County we have a merchant coal plant that's being shut down, and certainly we don't have the difficulties that a lot of parts of Virginia have where I come from. But anytime you lose a big business, you lose jobs, and it's injurious to the local economy. And I just don't know why we have to single out natural gas or coal-fired plants in this bill. And I think all plants should be treated equally. So I hope you'll adopt this amendment.
Thank you, Senator. For what purpose, Senator from Fairfax City, Senator Rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak in favor of Senator Stewart's amendment.
Senator's the floor.
I think it's a good, just to make sure this concept applies equally, and so I speak in support.
Thank you, Senator. For what purpose, Senator from Mecklenburg? You okay? Do any other senators wish to be heard regarding the floor amendment? Seeing none, the question is, shall the floor amendment be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The floor amendment is adopted.
Mr. President.
Senator from Mecklenburg, Senator Ruff.
Since we've changed this bill somewhat from what it was, could this go by for the day?
Any objection? Sounds like there is objection. We will, if the senator maintains his motion, we will have a voice vote. Question is, shall House Bill 528 go by for the day? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The noes have it. The motion fails. Who wants to move passage?
Mr. President.
Senator from Fairfax City, Senator Peterson.
I move the bill pass. Speak to the bill.
Senator's the floor.
Mr. President, I won't recap all the comments that were made earlier, but I think this is a pro-ratepayer measure that corrects something that we did 2 years ago. The utilities brought that bill to us. They were the ones that brought that to us. We did not request that legislation, much like they brought the rate freeze bill to us. We did not request that legislation. So to the extent that we have elected new members to this body and we are bringing this bill back and correcting what I believe was a mistake 2 years ago, I say more power to us, and I move the bill pass.
For what purpose, Senator from King George, Senator Stewart rise?
Speak to the bill, Mr. President.
Senator's the floor.
Mr. President, I join with my colleague from Fairfax City and hope everyone will support this bill. But I also want to say this. I think the utilities do a fantastic job in my district and all across Virginia, and I don't mean this bill to disparage them in any way, shape, or form, because the others who have spoken on this floor are exactly right. This General Assembly regulates them and directs them. And I think that this bill is the appropriate direction. So I hope you all will pass it.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose, Senator from Roanoke County, Senator Suderline rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking briefly.
Senator's the floor.
Mr. President, I very much agree with the senators from Fairfax City and King George. And I just want to echo again, I don't think that there's anything wrong with us taking a policy that might be contrary to a policy that we previously adopted. That's what we do here every year. This is just one of the rare times that it's in the benefit of the ratepayer, and I hope it's something that we'll be able to do today.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard regarding House Bill 528? Seeing none, question is, shall House Bill 528 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 27, noes 13.
Ayes 27, noes 13. House Bill 528 passes.
House Bill 1116, a bill relating to political parties, notification of adoption of primary election, certification of candidates. Reporting from the Committee on Privileges and Elections, and there is a floor amendment. Substitute.
Senator from Eastern Fairfax, Senator Sarvell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I renew my motion to adopt the floor substitute. Do I have to waive reading again? Okay, Mr. President, first of all, I move that we waive reading of the floor substitute.
Thank you, Senator. The question is, should the reading of the floor substitute be waived? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The reading of the floor substitute is waived. Senator from Eastern Fairfax, Senator Sarvell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I renew my motion that we pass the floor substitute, and speaking to that motion.
Senator's the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. We debated this at length yesterday. I think at least we got straight on our side as to what the bill does and what it means now. But the bill basically just says that the default method of nomination for a legislative candidate is a primary unless the state central committee picks an alternate method for all 140 seats of the legislature. That's basically what the floor sub does, and then the underlying, the rest of the bill just talks about who notifies the Department of Elections about that. That's what the bill does. Happy to take questions. We talked about it a lot. I renew my motion that it pass.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard regarding the floor substitute?
Mr. President.
Senator from Roanoke County, Senator Suderline.
I have an inquiry. Of you.
Ask away.
Mr. President, I'd be interested to know if the floor substitute is germane given the underlying bill.
The Senate will be at ease.